Hi, everybody!
Persona is one of the most popular Japanese role-playing games of all time. It's obvious as to why. The games are the right mix of good storytelling plus gameplay that's accessible, no matter how new you are to JRPGs. Part of why people love the story so much is because the games are relatable, either because of the themes they tackle, or just a shared experience everyone goes through, school life. But just like everything in life, Persona isn't perfect. There are some issues present within the series that have remained consistent problems ever since modern Persona started. Before we dig into the problems which plague the Persona franchise, I have to define what modern Persona is. The first game debuted in 1996 with Revelations Persona, a spin-off of Atlus's highly successful Shin Megami Tensei franchise. Revelations Persona sold well enough to warrant a sequel. These would turn into Persona 2 Innocent Sin in 1999 and Persona 2 Eternal Punishment the following year. The Persona 2 duology sold well enough, but nowhere near the levels of future games. These first two entries in the Persona series had much more in line with its parent franchise than later games would. It took 6 years for Atlus to take another stab at Persona titles. This is where things changed, and Persona started to become the gaming powerhouse that it is today. So what changed with Persona 3? This is where Atlus made the school life section of the game actually matter. This turned the Persona franchise into something relatively new. Before this point, a hybrid of a JRPG and a social sim had yet to hit the mainstream. The closest would have been adult-centric dating sims, which have been popular in Eastern countries since the 90s. But it was this combination of traditional RPG and social sim elements that set up modern Persona, of which we currently have 3 games, with a 4th one expected to come out sometime soon. The 3 games that fall into this category are Persona 3, 4, and 5, along with their definitive editions in Persona 3 FES, which came out in 2007, Persona 4 Golden, which came out in 2012, exactly 4 years after the base game, and 5 Royal, which released 3 years after the vanilla version of 5. These definitive versions is how Atlus have handled not just the Persona games, but a vast majority of their projects since 2007. However, that changed with Persona 3 Reload, which is their first title to operate on a Seasons Pass model. Now that I've outlined a brief history of what makes a modern Persona game, it's time for me to give an overview of what the problems are and how to fix them. But if you've made it this far into the video, hit the subscribe button. As I said during the start of the video, Persona games are popular for a reason, but they aren't perfect. The first issue I'd like to highlight seems to be a problem Atlus faces with all of their games, not just Persona ones. Spin-offs are excluded from this argument, however, given they aren't mainline experiences. Maybe I'll do a video on that down the line. So, what are the problems? The main problem Atlus faces with not just Persona, but their other games, is the pacing. I found for the most part, 3/4 of a Persona title will be well paced. Then I hit a wall around the 3/4 point. This is also an issue I'm presently facing in Metaphor ReFantazio, another Atlus title which is a great game until you reach the final stages, at which point the pacing grinds to a halt and the experience feels like an exhausting slog to get through. With the Persona games, I felt this the most with Persona 4 Golden and Persona 3 Reload, with the grinding slog coming a little bit earlier in Persona 5 and 5 Royal. I understand games need to change their paces up periodically, either because the developer wants you to take a step back and enjoy the little things the experience has to offer, or it's done to elevate an aspect of the narrative. Games can't go at breakneck pace all the time, otherwise the player is going to get overwhelmed. So I do get why it's done. However, people still feel like modern Persona games have uneven pacing, and it's something I agree with. How would I fix this problem though? I think the way to fix it would to make these segments shorter. Persona games are usually 100+ hour marathons. This is usually because of how social sim heavy the games become during main story beats, but Atlus have the tools in place to make this particular slog a little bit easier. Some of the downtime cutscenes between major arcs have characters hanging out. So one way this could be made less grindy is giving a significant bump in relationship score with the characters you currently have the lowest affinity with. That way you spend less of your precious downtime wasting it away on scenes that don't advance that particular social link at all. They could also improve things by giving you specific mini-quests to do before the next story beat. I'm counting these mini-quests as something separate from side quests, as those are optional. In a lot of ways, the players feel directionless or sometimes railroaded during these slogging sections, such as when Morgana goes missing in P5 and all the main character can do is go to bed. Nobody likes these segments of the game because they take away player agency, along with feeling like you're just sitting through an interactive and not very interesting cutscene. These are just some of the ways I'd correct the feeling of tedium players tend to experience in the late stages of an Atlus game though. What are some of the other issues plaguing modern Persona games? This might be more of a me thing, but I've noticed in general the AI in Persona games is effectively brain dead. I get these games aren't supposed to be insanely hard experiences, but I feel there's a fine line between brain dead punching bags and opponents who will be challenging but aren't unfair. This is where Metaphor really gets things right. In Metaphor, even low-level enemies can prove a challenge if you don't have the right party composition or the correct items, giving the game a more retro feel, since old games tended to not hold your hand. The enemy AI in that game can also be pretty smart as well. If you have a party member who's weak to one of their skills, that party member is going to get targeted. Same if you have a character who's more underleveled than the rest of your party. It doesn't make the game hard per se, it just makes it more challenging. So clearly Atlus have the ability to make the enemies smarter. Instead, they just opt to make them more brain dead than a zombie who hasn't had their morning cup of coffee. Speaking of, if any coffee company wants to sponsor the channel, hit me up. I love the stuff. But that's beside the point. The truth is, with Persona, I often feel like I'm throwing myself at the enemy and not feeling challenged by them, even at higher difficulty levels, where they usually remain dumb as rocks. This is also something a lot of people take issue with. Basically, the Shin Megami Tensei fans in the crowd. But I'll say this, SMT really isn't that hard. It just tends to punish players not paying attention to signposts, which are clear as day. Even SMT3 Nocturne, which most people laud as the Dark Souls for turn-based JRPGs, isn't that bad. It's just very much of its time, where devs expected you to figure shit out. Do I have any other issues with Persona though? I do to an extent, and it's something I imagine Atlus will fix going forward. We've effectively been waiting 10 years between mainline titles. Had Persona 6 entered development right after Persona 5 Vanilla launched, we would have had it in 2019 at the earliest and 2022 at the latest. However, it apparently entered full development in 2019, so 2022 was the earliest we'd have seen it. Where am I getting these numbers from? The fact games take 3 to 5 years on average to produce. But Atlus have to know they can't milk Persona 6 for spin-off after spin-off like they did with P5, since that'll just piss off its core fanbase. It's also not like they can milk remakes at this point, since we'd really only need remakes of Persona 1 and 2. Given 3 already has its remake, 4 will probably see its remake release sometime next year, and 5 doesn't require one, since most people still hold it as the gold standard for Japanese RPGs. So if Persona 6 launches next year, I imagine we'll probably see Persona 7 in 2029 at the earliest. So what problems do you feel Persona has? Do you feel like I missed any? Let me know in the comments section. Thanks go out to my current channel members, R. Campbell, Danny Boy, and Doug S. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can do so by clicking the join button or the link in the description. In doing so, you'll get early access to most of my videos, exclusive content, and shoutouts during the credits of every video. Now check out my video on Persona 6, and if it should be a dark game or not. Until next time, keep blazing that trail.